everybody, it's Dave here. And, yep, sure enough, Siri or my HomePod was going off with the show's theme song, and that's not a great way to start the show. But here we are, Saturday, and two old bloggers, and there it goes again. I love this stuff. Two old bloggers, me and Darren, came to you to talk. I just put my computer to sleep. This is wonderful. Hey, everybody, it's Dave here. I cannot shut that thing off. All right. Siri my HomePod was going off with the show. Okay. Hold on a second.
Minor technical difficulties.
It's going to get solved real quick when it gets unplugged. Darren, take it away.
Yeah. Welcome everybody who's in to the show, the two old bloggers. Dave's trying to get the technology figured out, and I think he's solved the problem by unplugging Siri.
Yes.
Skål, Mary. Skål, Mary. Thanks for stopping by again. You are a faithful viewer.
Absolutely. Today,
Mary Fisk.
Today we planned on talking generally about the Vikings defense, and more specifically about the defensive line, and then we'll get into Ant Harris. So let's talk the defense as a whole. What did you see this season so far, 2020, with the last game being tomorrow, that you liked or concerned you?
I'll start with the maybe the likes. Start with the positive because we want to keep it that way. And Mary, I'm doing great. Hope you're doing great. Happy New Year, and we'll see you tomorrow on the game thread on the Facebook.
While Darren tries to reconnect, if he can hear me, because he's froze out completely. If I still want to know his answer, what he saw of the defense. There he goes. He's disconnected. Back on, coming back on. There he is. You got bumped somehow, frozen, and
that's the first time it's happened.
That's first time for you. It's not the first time it's ever happened, but it's first time for you. So, get back to our question. What did you think of the defense, and what concerns you?
Yeah, I was going to start with the positive first. The biggest positive that I'm going to take away from all of this was the play of a couple of the young corners, Gladney and Dantzler. We had our concerns wondering how they would fare and getting thrown to the wolves, especially when Hughes got hurt early in the year and Holton Hill as well. And although they had both had their struggles at times, and I felt that particularly Dantzler, as the year went on and they got more snaps and got more experience, they really seemed to start understanding what they needed to be doing out there in the Zimmer defense and playing a lot better. It didn't show up in the game against New Orleans for anybody, and Gladney was one of the worst, but really like what I've seen from Gladney, particularly on the tackling stuff. He's got a 5 or 6. I think he's second on the team in tackles for losses. Which is he's got kind of an Antoine Winfield toughness about him. Again, didn't show up last game. And in coverage, he's doesn't have any interceptions yet this year, but he's had some pass defenses, and he's been playing in the nickel, in the slot, a very tough position for a rookie or anybody to do. And he's done, I think, reasonably well for a rookie. And I think that there's a lot of promise for him for the next year with all the experiences he's got. Dantzler's really shown a very nice knack for making plays on the ball as the year went on. Like that interception he made against Trubisky in the game against Chicago, where he was covering the guy, but he recognized that Trubisky was going to be throwing to not the guy he was covering, and he slid over and made that interception. Was just a sweet play and shows great instincts. And I think it bodes very well for the future to have those two guys in our secondary. And even last game, not all great, but I liked seeing that play that Harrison Hand made on the ball. 5th-round draft pick. We didn't expect to see him play really at all, but he's had to play a bit, and it's too early to tell. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from. I've liked what I've seen from him at times, and there might be some promise there that we might have got a bit of a diamond in the rough in the 5th round. So liking what I'm seeing from some of the young secondary guys, and that bodes well for the secondary. The big concerns on defense for me are obviously the rush defense, which has been horrible lately and not very good the whole year. Particularly our defensive line, especially on the inside, has not held up at all. And then the pass rush has been limp all year as well, and that's a big concern going into next year.
I like that adjective. All right. Back to Gladney. With Gladney, though, Gladney plays both outside and in the slot. So he's learning 2 positions, which is not easy in the Zimmer defense. He has done well. I like that you pointed out. He is very good at tackling. His coverage grades aren't as great. His passer rate against isn't as great, but it's improving. Dantzler, by far, looks, if he can stay healthy, and this is what I worry about Cameron, is his slight build. He's skinny. He's thin, literally thin. And people have talked about, well, there's not a whole lot of room. Yeah, we try to put on 25 pounds, but there's not a whole lot of room to where to put it. So, but his skills and his willingness to hit are up there. And those are 2 that I think we have bright spots for next season.
Definitely. I think you'll go ahead, Dave.
Your description of the defensive line, I would put as inadequate, period. Whether it be against the rush or the pass, they've been inadequate. And on the typical go, no-go scale that the military likes to use, it'd be a no-go. They've been bad.
Yeah. I forgot to mention DJ Wanham in there as a guy that has been a bit of a bright spot. Hasn't really shown as much of a pass rush. Hasn't made as much of a pass rush impact in recent weeks. But at every game, he seems like he makes one play that makes you think, that kid's got something there. Like it's a tackle for a loss. He knifes into the backfield and brings down a running back for a no gain, or it might be only 1 or 2 plays, but still, when you consider guys like Jaleel Johnson, Stefan, and even Odenigbo, some games there's no plays where you're noticing them in a good way. I'll take that. And when we know Anwanam, even coming out of the draft, the book on him was maybe not the most talented pass rush guy, but he's got the right build and he plays hard every snap, every game. And I think we've seen the effort is always there with Wanham. And if he can gain a few pass rush moves over the next year or two and refine that
and grows,
his pass rush may be much improved compared to what was projected from him coming out of college. So he's another guy that I think we got to watch out for.
Yeah, and you got to remember, Everson Griffin was a slow starter as well, and it took a bit. And even Hunter Griffin wasn't. He showed flashes when he first started playing, but that was it. He didn't develop into the monster until second, third years.
Yeah.
So Rhino chimed in. Can't have a limp rush. Can't have a limp anything, Rhino. Now, did see Rhino, as you know, is normally on the pregame show, and he wasn't last night. Well, it turns out Rhino is having his appendix removed. Ooh. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
That's what happened to Madison, wasn't it?
Yep. Alexander Madison had his removed. So we wish Rhino all the best, that the surgeons have, angels guiding their hands, and it's a uncomplicated, easy, simple surgery, and he gets home and back to us next week.
Yeah, Rhino's kind of must be thinking, here I was so glad to get 2020 out of the way. In 2021, I'm getting my appendix removed.
Yeah.
What's up with that? But hopefully, Ryan, we wish you well, and that, yes, the surgery goes well, and you're back up and at 'em in no time.
Mary asks, what do we think of Hunter being back playing on the defensive line next year. Do you have a thought?
It all, I think, really depends on. We know Hunter is going to be Hunter if he's fully healthy. The question is, what does the surgery? And I haven't really heard. I'm assuming he had some medical procedures done on that herniated disc.
He had
Um,
surgery, and I'm assuming most for surgery for a herniated disc is to clean everything out type deal.
and I don't know much about. I read a bit about it when it was initially announced that that was what Hunter had. That it wasn't a tweak to his back, but it was
Uh,
actually a herniated disc. Because I've had some back issues myself over the years. But it didn't sound like a really great injury for anybody doing athletic things
mhm.
to have. So I am concerned that the Hunter, he'll certainly try to come back, and he's going to get the best medical. He's getting the best medical. Professional athletes get seen by specialists that us regular schlubs don't get to see. Like they get to see the top of the top surgeons for
Right.
whatever ails them. So he's going to get the best. He's getting the best medical care he can get. But it's still, anytime you're talking about a back, that concerns me. That's going to impact how he does things in the future. If he's back like 100%, it's great for the Vikings and great for Daniil Hunter, and that'll vastly improve our pass rush just having him back. But I do
Mhm.
worry about if we're going to see the Daniil Hunter next year that we've seen the previous five because of the back issues.
Because of the neck, the upper
Yeah,
vertebrae.
yeah.
Um, there's also the question of his uh, agent wanting him paid to be the highest defensive end in the league.
Yes, which considering the Vikings salary cap situation, when the cap gets dropped and depending on who they restructure or release, we're still not going to have a ton of cap room, I don't think. And yeah, for somebody like Hunter to be wanting to get a contract that's north of 20 million a year, which I think is be what he'd be looking for,
Mm-hmm.
that might be a tough one for the Vikings to pull off with the other things that they have to address. But it's the other thing is if you don't, if he kind of pulls a Diggs and wants to leave, and can you afford not considering
Right.
what the way their defensive line is shaping up, what they have now? Uh, can you afford not to keep him and pay him? Uh,
Right.
uh,
And if fully healthy, he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And
yeah, fully
now,
healthy, he's worth. But he's probably you probably got to pay him that, but we just don't know what his health situation is.
now there is one little bright spot if they do decide to pay him that, considering he's 100% healthy. And that is they could, it would be an extension because he's under contract for the next 2 seasons.
Yeah,
But they could push money out to where the bigger payments, it may average north of 20 million a year, but the bigger payments are further out when the league's finances are in better shape and the
right.
cap skyrockets, after they all catch up here in about 3-4 years. And
And by that point, maybe you don't have Cousins on the
right.
books either.
so so that's your answer, Mary. We both expect him back and playing next season.
At what price, we're not sure.
Right, but we expect him back.
Yeah. The On that subject, I guess for defensive line, there's a number of guys that I would like not to be back next year. If and maybe we can talk a little bit about that and get your thoughts on it as well.
Shamar. I mean, Shamar's an adequate backup. Period.
Yeah, um, forced to play a whole lot of snaps with the Vikings the past 2 years. And he has a 5 million cap hit next year, which is actually one of the more surprisingly one of the larger ones on the Vikings. And if they were to cut him pre June 1st, they'd save not a huge amount, but they'd save like 3.75 million according to over the cap, which is not insignificant considering the Vikings cap
Mm-hmm.
constraints this year. But if just looking at the line the way it is now, if guys that I would prefer that the Vikings cut ties with, I'd be willing to say Jalen Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the memories. Jaleel Johnson, who is a free agent, I don't see any way that he's back, but
Right.
what do we know? Armin Watts, I would throw to the curb. Stefan and Hercules Mataafa. I'd keep Hunter, of course, Pierce, Wanham, Lynch, and I would keep Odenigbo, but he's a restricted free agent. I don't think it'll take a whole lot to put a tender on him that will discourage anybody from trying to do that, but to re-sign him. But Odenigbo I would keep because last year, he had 7.5 sacks, I think. This year, not able to follow up on that, but I think he's a good rotational piece.
Mm-hmm.
But if I want to get rid of those 5 guys I just mentioned, that's a lot of people that you have to replace in 2021, and that's a big issue. And I think, and it's a tough year because again, we don't know how much cap space the Vikes are going to have to.
Well, minimum 175 million, which of course, virtually I think every team except for maybe 1 or 2 is already over. So
yeah, but I guess when everything gets gets resolved and at the beginning of the new year and we get a better idea, we don't know right now what when the dust settles what the Vikings cap space is going to, what they're actually going to have, like what they're paying people and who they've released and how much cap space they have. And that's going to make things so that makes it hard to predict what can we do in free agency to maybe fill a hole or two. On the defensive line, the big names, the obvious ones like Shaq Barrett, everybody's going to be pointing to, well, sign Shaq Barrett, sign Jadeveon Clowney, sign Trey Hendrickson, even sign, maybe take another run at Ngakoue. But everybody's going to be looking to get those guys, including the teams that already have them. So most of those guys may re-sign with who they're already with. On defensive tackle, same sort of thing. It'd be the big guys that stand out to me be Leonard Williams would be a hell of a guy to add for the Vikings. But again, everybody's going to want Leonard Williams. Even Ndamukong Suh would be a nice add, but does he go back to Tampa? There's a lot of uncertainty. You can't, I think, on free agency, it's the big guys you're always going to have to overspend with. Are you able to find a few gems that are maybe underappreciated, like a guy like Tom Johnson that you can get at a reasonable salary and really produces for you? One guy I've always liked on the defensive tackle side of things, and he's had some injury problems, was when I'd watched the Eagles, Hassan Ridgway was always a guy the past couple of years I felt like was really had a lot of disruptive traits when he played, but he's been injured quite a bit the past 2 years. But he's a guy, he's 26, he's coming off a bicep injury that cost him a good portion of the year. Didn't play much for the Eagles, but he's been productive at times. 26, maybe he's a kind of a guy. He's going to be maybe underappreciated. You could get him at a reasonable salary. He could come in and he's not expecting. He could be a rotational piece who could get, if depending on how he plays, he could take more snaps. He's the kind of a guy that maybe the Vikings. I don't know how they feel about Ridgway, but that's the kind of a player this year in free agency that we may be seeing the Vikings target and signing. Not some big name guy like Leonard Williams or Shaq Barrett, but some of these other under the radar guys.
Mary, to answer your question, yes, I see the defense going from wherever we are now, about 27th-ish, somewhere in there, back into a top 10 defense with bringing the healthy back and adding some to it. I don't see a repeat. We didn't repeat 2016 when we lost all our offensive linemen to injury. We didn't repeat it in 2017. I don't see a repeat of all the injuries we've had this year on the defensive side in 2021. So I suspect we will move back closer to the top 10 defense. And hopefully the offense keeps cranking on up and gets top 5. And that should, knowing those numbers and how they traditionally work, get us close to being very much in contention. That's what I'm looking forward to. Now,
Yeah,
we'll
always
have
hard to
to,
tell about the injury luck, how that's going to work, right?
right.
But it didn't work in our favor this year.
But I do think they need to focus on that interior defensive line. Pierce should step up. He's supposedly Linval Joseph, Jr. We'll
Yeah.
see. Nobody's watched him play here at Minnesota, but we'll see. He's got a year's worth of watching it on the iPad, at least. At least I hope he's been doing that. Worry about his weight. That was one of his issues in Baltimore as he came into camp overweight. Hopefully he stayed in shape. Then a good three technique would help tremendously. Also, for next year, 2021, we get at least two of the linebackers back, Kendricks and Barr. That's important, and that what they do feeds off of what the defensive line does tremendously. If you could got a guy that takes up two blockers like Pierce, that frees a linebacker to hit the hole more readily. And if you can get push from that defensive line, that frees them to either blitz or go into pass coverage. Now, sticking on the defense and behind that defensive line, do you see Eric Wilson, staying with the Vikings? He is a free agent, I believe, after this season.
It's tough for me to make a call on that at this point, Dave, because I'm not sure what the Vikings are going to do with Barr. To me, it's a decision it's going to be made. It's either Barr or Wilson that they keep, and you could retain Wilson at a cheaper, I think at a somewhat cheaper salary than what Barr's at now, but my guess is, assuming that Zimmer is back next year, and I think that's depending on what happens tomorrow. And we talked about this last night, but pretty likely that he's back. I think that Zimmer likes Barr more as a starter than Wilson. If that wasn't the case, well, Wilson would have been playing a lot more than he was when Barr was healthy.
Right,
so
and he would have beat out Gideon.
Yeah.
If that was the case.
That's right. And Gideon was Wilson only started playing when Gideon went out with the concussion stuff. So I don't. You said I think you agree. I don't see Wilson being back next year unless the Vikings decide unless the Vikings can't get Barr. I think Barr also he needs to restructure his contract in order to be back. Because I think his cap hit is $13 million or maybe even more next year, which is way, way too much for what his production is, as much as I like what Barr does. But if Barr I expect that they'll try to restructure Barr, that they'll get that done somehow, and Wilson will be allowed to get a bigger deal somewhere else.
Yeah, Wilson's faults is he's adequate at pass defense, but he's not very good. Basically inadequate at rush defense and the traditional linebacker stuff where you plug yourself into a hole and you take on the running back. He's not that good. That's why Gideon started over Wilson to start off with. And that's just, Barr's better at both of those. Problem with Barr is staying healthy. And he frustrates us because he goes into series of games where you don't see him, and then there's others he just flashes and is a huge impact. And we wish he was a huge impact across the board, more like Eric Kendricks.
That's why you're paying him the money you're paying him, so that he's doing that every game, not just every third game or fourth game.
Exactly. And that's why I agree they need to restructure and bring his salary down, and I think they will. We'll see. That brings us to the back end of the defense. We have two safeties that have played all season, just like they did the previous season, and Harrison Smith, the hitman, and Anthony Harris. You wanted to talk about Anthony Harris. Let's start talking about Anthony.
Yeah, the reason I want to talk about Harris, and it's no secret to Vikings fans, would be because it appears to me and to other fans that he has not played up to the standard that we've seen Anthony Harris play the previous few years, this in 2020. And I'm just going to throw out, you threw these to me, David, and thank you for this. But I want
There's
to throw
his 2021 season grades. It's hard to see. I apologize. Unless you're on your big screen TV, you're probably not going to see the numbers, but you can see the colors, right? And blue is very, very good, and working towards red is bad. So if you're looking on a color scale, but I did blow one up over the seasons, which you should be able to see.
And
these are from
we're using Pro Football Focus rankings, and again, we're not trying to say that Pro Football Focus rankings are the gospel, but they are a company that has people that watch players play after play and puts a ranking on what they do, which gives us some sort of a metric to assess how these players are doing besides what we see when we're watching the games. And you look at Harris I think he was 2019, I think his overall grade was 91.1.
And he was a top-rated safety in 2019, which helped earn him his franchise tag.
Yeah. In 2018, he wasn't much lower, 89.0. Mm-hmm. This year, it's 66. And really,
and if you look at the coverage grade, it's down to 62. He was great in coverage the last 2 seasons, and this year, not so much.
Not so much. And we've seen that in the games. And what's been bothering, or the question I've heard from a lot of Viking fans is, what the hell has happened to Anthony Harris? He was so good in 2019 and 2018, and this year he is not very good, missing a lot of tackles, taking bad false steps and making wrong reads on pass coverage, getting burned on deep throws. What has happened to the guy? And my theory was that initially, early in the year, I felt that because the Zimmers was having the safeties play really deep, mm-hmm. and to guard against deep throws against a young secondary, and so we weren't. One of the things that's quite noticeable about Harris is that he had 6 interceptions last year and 3 the year before, and this year he doesn't have any, and he hasn't even really come close to making any interceptions that I remember. We've gotten used to him being a guy who had a knack for making plays, making interceptions, and we're not seeing this year. I felt that the safeties were being forced to guard against the deep ball so much and not get beat over the top that they just weren't getting the opportunity to make those plays on the ball. As the year has gone on and our rookie corners have got a little bit more comfortable, I think we've been seeing Hitman and Harris a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. So maybe that's not the issue now. I don't have the answer for what's happened to him, but it's obvious that the play has dropped off. And I don't think that he's going to be back next year at the Vikings. And
well, he's a free agent. We had him on the franchise tag. That's only for 1 year.
That's right.
Ted suggested trading, but you can't trade a free agent. We won't own his rights after this season. And if I remember correctly, the new league year starts, I think it's March 17th, but it's sometime in March. So
the one thing that I did want to mention with Harrison, the decline and what's the reason for it is I have read and heard some people insinuating that Harris got paid, got lazy, and so that's why he's dropped off, which is an argument I have a tough time buying just when you look at the history of this guy who was an undrafted rookie free agent in 2015. He was considered one of the top safeties in that draft, didn't get drafted because he had an injury. It was a shoulder, I think, or a torn labrum, something like that. And so he gets signs with the Vikings, doesn't make the team, is on the practice squad, eventually gets added to the team in the middle of 2015, plays a bit, sits for a couple of years behind Andrew Sendejo, and then when he gets he finally gets to start full-time in 2018. So he's had to work for everything that he got at the NFL level. And he knows how fickle the life in the NFL can be, what the difference is between being drafted and not drafted, and how quickly your fortunes can go up or down depending on injuries. That just doesn't seem like a guy that he gets paid 1 year, and granted it was 11 million, but that just doesn't seem to me like a guy that gets paid and says, hey, I got her made, I'm done, I don't have to work anymore. I just don't buy into that argument. But I don't think he got lazy, but something's wrong with the guy. He's had an off year maybe, and next year maybe he comes back, but it probably won't be with the Vikings.
And it probably won't be for that much money either.
No.
So we'll see.
It leaves a hole for another hole for the Vikings defense to fill, because assuming Harrison Smith is back, which I think is a fairly good assumption, he might be a guy who's in line for a restructure as well. But who takes Harris's place right now? I don't even know who's next on the depth chart. Josh Metellus? Are the Vikings going to roll with Metellus as a opposite of Harrison Smith? I don't see it. So that means you either got to draft or find a replacement
Or find
in
a free
agency.
An adequate free agent. Yeah.
Yeah. And the top guy is Johnson from the Rams, and again, anywhere he signs, whether it's back with the Rams or with somebody else, that's going to be mucho bucks too.
Right, and they're not going to. I don't think they would look for a top guy. I mean, the Vikings defense has done well with Hitman back there and Sendeo.
Yep.
And it was just, and we always said, well, imagine if we can find somebody that plays next to Hitman that plays well. We did with Harris, but it wasn't that much of a difference between Hitman and Sendeo and Hitman and Harris in the production level. They were about equal. So if you can find just somebody to play that's competent, then Ted, no, he's a free agent.
What is it? Yeah, they like, you may have to roll with competent.
Hey, Donnie. And I think that's good enough. I think that will be good enough. And I'm sure they'll draft a safety somewhere in, whether it's high or not, or in the 27th rounders that Eric Spielman likes to pick up. We don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see.
And as the off season goes on, you'll be delving more into the draft, I think. But what I have been hearing is that might not be a great year for drafting safeties. And also, unfortunately, and I didn't get to mention this when I was talking about the defensive line, but in the interior, the defensive tackles, not a great, very deep draft class there either. Like some of the top guys, Barmore from Alabama, Nixon from Iowa, and Tufale from USC, who didn't even play this year. Mm-hmm. Those guys, and I've only read a couple of reports on the defensive tackle draft class, but those guys, most of those guys, top three, they're not even sure that they're going to go in the first round.
Right.
And we don't have a second round pick right now. So if the Vikings are looking to replenish the interior through the draft, this isn't looking like the best year to do that.
And so free agency, but for free agency, you need to free up some more money, and let's see what happens.
Yep.
Let's see what happens. But first, we have tomorrow's game. Any quick prediction on that?
I expect the Vikings to win, but it's going to be a boring, ugly game, and by the midway through the third quarter, it'll probably have the feel of a preseason game if it doesn't before that, because there's going to be a lot of backups playing on both sides. For the Vikings defense, the backups will already be playing because we don't have many other corners or linebackers. Or I don't know if it's true, but I was just looking at the Vikings depth chart on ESPN, and they've got Jordan Brailford as one of our starting ends tomorrow. I don't know if that ends up being the case, but Wanham and Brailford as your starting defensive ends, not how I think we pictured the season going for the Vikings.
Nope.
But it's going to be, it's one of those games like we were talking about last night. The only thing that's up for grabs here is individually players are playing for jobs. And the big intrigue is what draft position the Vikings get after the day is over. Are we 15th? Are we 13th? Are we 12th? Are we 10th?
Yep. And Nick, you're right. It's going to be who sucks the most tomorrow will lose this game. And part of that's attitude, so we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess the other intrigue, and we mentioned it earlier, the other interesting thing is depending on how the players play and react to this game, what that means for the future of Mike Zimmer. And a bad loss by the Vikings to the Lions, it could happen, could cost him his job. I don't think a loss, just whether it's a narrow loss or a 10-point loss, is going to be the thing that costs him his job. But as Drew Bunting was saying last night on the pregame show, like if you go in Detroit and lose by 30 points to a team last week that looked like it had quit on the season already, that may raise a few eyebrows from the Wolves and cause them to make a change in the head coaching position.
Yep, we shall see. And for tomorrow, catch us after the game for Good Morning Gjallarhorn in the Raw, about 10 minutes after we go live. And we hope to see you all there again, plus some.
Always a must-watch.
Always a must-watch. And until then, it's time to say goodbye, Darren.
Yes, I've talked long enough. Happy New Year, everybody. Skol Vikings. Let's hope that they get the win tomorrow, but if they don't, I think most of us won't feel too bad about that either.
Yep. Skol Vikings! Let's win this game!
Vikings. And thanks to Dave Stefano for all the vlogging hosting he's done over the past month. It's been yeoman work, day in, day out. Hardest working man in show business right there, David Stefano.
All right, cool.
Well done.
See you guys tomorrow.
See ya.
Thank you for watching or listening. As always, if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to the podcast, please rate us on your favorite aggregator. Skol, everybody.